Здравствуйте. Добрый день. Как вы поживаете? Hello, good day, how are you? Hey, we're back with Russian Princess Varvara and our Marigold of Cloud of Spruce. This is Magic for Marigold, Chapter 10, the second half, Parts 4, 5, and 6. My name is Leslie Weston. I'm talking to you now from Ann Arbor, Michigan, and I'm going to read to you. 4. Varvara insisted on helping Marigold to get supper, though Marigold would have preferred being alone. Company did not help to get supper at Cloud of Spruce, but Varvara was out to do as she liked, and she did it. She helped set the table, remarking, "That cup is just like the one Aunt Clara used to have. Her husband bit a piece out of it one day when he was in a tantrum." Marigold knew by this alone that Varvara was no princess. Princesses' uncles could never do things like that. Why, Fidine had done that once, bit a piece right out of his wife's much-prized cut-glass tumbler, the only one she had. A lady she had worked for had given it to her. Varvara even went on to the spare room with Marigold to get the fruit cake. Marigold decided that for company she must cut some fruit cake. Grandmother always did, and it was kept in a box under the spare room bed. The sleek, smooth, terrible spare room bed where so many people had died. The fruit cake had always been kept there ever since Grandmother's children were small, and the spare room was the only place they dared not to look for it. "Oh!" squealed Varvara. "Is that a feather bed? A real feather bed?" "Yes." Varvara took one wild leap and she landed squarely in the middle of it, bounding up and down in ecstasy right on Grandmother's famous spread of filet crochet. "I've always wanted to see what a feather bed was like. I didn't think there were any left in the world." Marigold was horrified. That sacred spare room bed. What would Grandmother say? "Every dead person in our family, except for old Grandmother, has died in that bed," she said. Varvara turned pale and hastily slid off the bed. "Well, why didn't you tell me that before I jumped on it, you little whelp?" she cried excitedly. "I'm not a little whelp," said Marigold. "Of course you're not." There was another wild hug and kiss. Marigold emerged from it somewhat discomposed. The Leslies were not so emotional. But when Varvara saw the chocolate cake in the pantry, she must have that for supper. She must. "We can't," said Marigold. "Grandmother said I wasn't to touch it." Varvara stamped her foot. "I don't care what your grandmother said. I will have it. I'm keen on chocolate cake, and they never let me have more than 2 tiny pieces. Just put that cake right on the table at once." "We are not going to have that cake," said Marigold. There was no one by to see it, but at that instant she looked like a pocket edition of Grandmother. "There is the fruit cake and the date loaf and the hop and go fetch-its." "I don't want your hop and go, whatever you call them. Once and for all, are we going to have this cake?" "Once and for all, we are not." Varvara clenched her hands. "If I were my grandmother, I'd order you to be knouted to death." "If I were my grandmother, I'd turn you over my knees and I would spank you," said Marigold intrepidly. Varvara at once grew calm. Deadly, stonily calm. "If you don't let me have that chocolate cake for my supper, I'll go and climb what you call the apple barn roof, and I will jump down." "You can't scare me with that," said Marigold scornfully. Varvara turned without a word and marched out. Marigold followed her a little uneasily. Of course, she was only bluffing. She wouldn't do that. Why, it would kill her. Even this wild creature couldn't do a thing like that. Varvara was running nimbly up the ladder. In another second, she was on the flat top of the gambrel roof. "Now, will you let me have that chocolate cake?" she cried. "No," said Marigold resolutely. Varvara jumped. Marigold screamed. She shut her eyes in anguish and she opened them, expecting to see Varvara dead and broken on the stones of the path below. What she saw was Varvara hanging, shrieking, on the pine tree by the apple barn. Her dress had billowed out and caught on the stub of a lopped branch. Marigold ran to her frantically. "Oh, you can have the chocolate cake. Oh, you can have anything." "How am I to get down?" moaned Varvara, whose temper and determination had evaporated between heaven and earth. "I'll bring the stepladder. I think you can reach it," gasped Marigold. Varvara managed to escape by the grace of the stepladder, although she tore her dress woefully in the process. "I always do just what I want, and what I say I'll do," she remarked coolly. "Just look at your dress," shivered Marigold. "I am more important than my dress," said Varvara loftily. Marigold was trembling in every limb as she went back to the pantry. Suppose Varvara really had fallen on those stones. Grandmother had said that girls from the States would do anything. Marigold believed it. "Now just look at how beautifully I've decorated the table," said Varvara proudly. Marigold looked. Grandmother's Killarney roses were drooped artistically in the big green basket. Oh yes, artistically. Oh, Varvara had that knack. "Grandmother told me I wasn't to pick any of those roses," wailed Marigold. "Well, you didn't, did you, darling donkey? Tell her I did it." Part 5 of Chapter 10, the second half. The real quarrel did not come until after supper. They had had quite a jolly supper. Varvara was so funny and interesting and said such dreadful things about the picture of Queen Victoria on the dining room wall. "Doesn't she look like somebody's old cook with a lace curtain on her head?" It really was a terrible chromo, originally sent out as a supplement, with a Montreal paper and framed in hundreds of houses all over the Loyal Island. It represented the good queen with a broad blue ribbon across her breast and a crown on her head, filled with diamonds, the least of which was as big as a walnut. From the crown descended the aforesaid lace curtain around the face and the bust of the queen, and what wasn't lace curtain was diamonds on ears and throat and breast and hands and arm. Marigold had always had much the same opinion as Varvara about it, and had once expressed this, only once. Grandmother had looked at her as if she had committed lèse-majesté and said, "That is Queen Victoria," as if Marigold hadn't known it. But Marigold wasn't going to have girls from the States coming in and making fun of the royal family. "I don't think you have any business to talk like that of our queen," she said haughtily. "Silly. She was Mother's aunt," retorted Varvara. "Mother remembers her well. She wasn't a bit handsome, but I'm sure she never looked like that. If that's where you get your idea of a princess's dress from, I don't wonder you don't think that I'm one. Marigold, this chocolate cake is simply topping." Varvara ate about half of the chocolate cake and paid it a compliment with every piece. "Well," reflected Marigold complacently, "certainly Cloud of Spruce cookery was good enough for anybody, even if she had been the princess that she was pretending to be. Varvara certainly was nice. One couldn't help liking her." Marigold decided that after the dishes were washed, she would take Varvara through the magic door and the green gate and introduce her to Sylvia. But when she went out to the garden after washing the dishes, she found Varvara tormenting her toad, her own pet toad, who lived under the yellow rose bush and knew her. Marigold was certain he knew her. And here was this abominable girl poking him with a sharp stick that must hurt him terribly. "You stop that!" she cried. "I won't. It's fun!" retorted Varvara. "I am going to kill it, poke it to death." Marigold darted forward and wrenched the stick out of Varvara's hand. She broke it in 3 pieces and confronted her self-invited guest in a truly Leslian anger. "You shall not hurt my toad," she said superbly. "I don't care what you threaten, not one bit. You can jump off the apple barn or down the well or go and throw yourself into the harbor. But you shan't kill my toad, Miss Princess." The derision that Marigold contrived to put into that princess is untransferable onto paper. Varvara suddenly was in a most terrible temper. She was almost like an animal in her rage. She bared her teeth and she dilated her eyes. Her very hair seemed to bristle. "Pig, louse, flea," she snarled. "Mooncalf, beast." Oh, the venom she contrived to put into her epithets. "You'd make God cry. You'd make God laugh. Cry, baby, snivelly thing." Marigold was crying, but it was with rage. Russian princesses, real or pretended, had no monopoly of temper. "You have the face of a monkey," Marigold cried. "Ah, pull your ears out by the roots," said Varvara with a horrible kind of deliberate devilishness. She hurled herself against Marigold. She pulled Marigold's hair and she slapped Marigold's face. Marigold had never been so manhandled in her life. Marigold, Lesli. She struck out blindly and she found Varvara's nose. She gave it a fierce, sudden tweak. Varvara emitted a malignant yowl and tore herself loose. You, do you think you can use me like this?" "Haven't I done it?" said Marigold triumphantly. Varvara looked around. On a garden seat lay grandmother's shears. With a yell, like a demon, she pounced on them. Before Marigold could run or stir, there was a sudden fierce click, another click, and Marigold's 2 pale gold braids were dangling limply in Varvara's beautiful hand. "Ow!" shrieked Marigold, clapping her hands to her shorn head. Suddenly Varvara laughed. Her brief insanity had passed. She dropped the shears and the golden tresses and flung her arms around Marigold. "Oh, let's kiss and make up. Mustn't let a little thing like this spoil a whole day. Say you forgive me, darlingest." Darlingest. Said it dazedly. She didn't want to, but she did. This wild girl of laughter and jest had 100 faults and the one great virtue of charm. She would always be forgiven anything. But Marigold, in spite of her shorn tresses, was almost glad to see grandmother and mother driving into the yard. What? Began grandmother, staring at Marigold's head. "I did it," interposed the ragged, flushed, juice-stained Varvara resolutely. "You are not to blame her for it. It was all my doings. I did it because I was furious, but I'm glad. You'll have to let her get it trimmed now, decently trimmed. And I ate the chocolate cake and picked the roses and jumped on the feather bed. She is not to be scolded at all for this. Remember that." Grandmother made an involuntary step forward. The Princess Varvara had the narrowest escape of her royal life. "Who are you?" demanded grandmother. Varvara told her as she had told Marigold, with this difference. She was believed. Grandmother knew all about the vice-regal visit to Prince Edward Island, and she had seen Varvara's picture in the Charlottetown Patriot. Grandmother set her lips together. One couldn't, of course, scold a grandniece of Queen Victoria and the daughter of a Russian prince. one couldn't. But oh, if one only could. An automobile stopped at the gate. A young man and an elderly lady got out of it and came up the walk. A very fine, tall, stately lady with diamonds winking on her fingers. Her hair snow white, her face long, her nose long. She could never have been beautiful, but she was not under any necessity of being beautiful. Oh, there's Aunt Clara and Lord Percy, whispered Varvara to Marigold. Oh, I can see that she is mad all over, and there's so much of her to get mad. Won't I get arousing? Marigold stiffened in horror. A dreadful conviction came over her that Varvara really was the princess she had claimed to be. And she had pulled her nose. The wonderful great lady walked past Varvara without even looking at her, without looking at anything, indeed. Yet one felt she saw everything and took in the whole situation, even to Varvara's muddy, dangling rags and dirty face. I am sorry, she said to grandmother, that my naughty little runaway niece should have given you so much trouble. Well, she has not been any trouble to us, said grandmother graciously, as one queen to another. I am very sorry I was not at home this afternoon, combining truth with courtesy to a remarkable degree. The great lady turned to Varvara. Come, my dear, she said softly and sweetly. Varvara disregarded her for a moment. She sprang past her and embraced Marigold tempestuously. If you were sugar, I would eat you up. Promise me you will always love me, even if you never see me again. Promise, as long as grass grows and water runs. Promise. I will. Oh, I will, gasped Marigold sincerely. It was very odd, but in spite of everything, she felt that she did and would love Varvara devotedly. I've had such a satisfying time today, said Varvara. They can't take that from me. Oh, I really didn't mean to kill your old toad. And you've had your hair bobbed. You can thank me and God for that. She danced off to the gate, ignoring Aunt Clara, Lady Clara, but throwing an airy kiss to grandmother. Laugh, Marigold, laugh, she called imperiously from the car. I like to leave people laughing. Marigold managed the ghost of a laugh, after which Varvara deliberately turned a complete double somersault before everybody and then hopped into the back seat. Lord Percy smiled at Mother. Mother was a very pretty woman. An incorrigible little demon, he said. I think, said grandmother quite quietly when she had heard the whole tale, that princesses are rather too strenuous playmates for you. Perhaps, after all, your imaginary Sylvia is really a better companion. Marigold thought so too. She ran happily through the dreamy peace of the orchard to meet the twilight that was creeping out of the spruce grove. Back to Sylvia, her comrade of starshine and moon mist, who did not pull hair and slap or provoke pulling and slapping. Sylvia, who was waiting for her in the shadows beyond the green gate. She was very well satisfied with Sylvia again. It was just as grandmother had said. Princesses were what was it? To it, anyhow. She was glad she hadn't told her about Sylvia. She was glad she hadn't shown her the dear fat little gray kittens in the apple barn. Who knew but Varvara would have held them up by their tails? And though she felt sure she could never forget Varvara, the tang of her, the magic of her mirth and storms, there was a queer, bitter little regret far down in her soul. She had been used to pretending. Suppose a princess dropped in to tea. And then it had happened, and she hadn't even known it. Besides, Varvara wasn't a bit like a princess, the way she had gobbled things down at supper. Meanwhile, down in Cloud of Blue Spruce, Mother was putting away Marigold's golden braids and crying over them. Grandmother was girding an apron on with a stern countenance to make another chocolate cake, late as it was. Salome was counting the hop and go fetches and wondering how 2 children could possibly have eaten so many in one afternoon. Marigold's appetite had never been extensive. I'll bet that princess will have stomachache tonight, if she never had it before, she thought vindictively. And Lucifer and the Witch of Endor were talking over the general cussedness of things under the milk bench. Take it from me, Lucifer was saying. Princesses aren't what they used to be back in the good old days. Spasiba, thank you.